Point family. This is Cam, and Good Friday is here. I hope it finds you well, and wanted to share some reflections from God's Word in my heart just for this time as we're walking into Easter. We are almost there. He has almost risen, but we all know we're living in a world where He has risen. And that is the hope that we have, even in the darkness and the struggles that we face each and every day. And so, as I reflect on God's Word, I wanted to walk through His final moments when He was on the cross. There was a 6-hour period where you have from the 3rd hour, which is around 9 a.m., to the 9th hour, which is 3 p.m. on Friday. And Jesus was on the cross. Crucifixion was happening. And He said some very important things. So there was what we call 7 sayings or 7 words that come from a spread of all the Gospels. So Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. You can't find all of them in one particular Gospel. But over the course of these 6 hours, He shares with us grave concerns. And so that might sound trope to you, but it is something I want us to consider. When I was in college, I had a professor named Dr. Fifield, or Mr. Fifield. And he shared with me, because I started mentoring me a little bit, and he said, Cam, I want you to do an exercise. And I was in this sales degree, and so I walk in his office and okay, what do you have for me? And he says, I want you to write down what you would hope others would write down on your tombstone if you never had the chance to tell them. I'm like, this is sales class. But I said, yes, sir, I will. And so what I found was that was harder to do than I expected at first. And I went home and I wrestled with it. So I came back and I gave him this example that I come up with. And he said, okay, that's good. Now I want you to take that and go take another week and think about it more. Maybe speak to some people who you truly respect. Some people that you want to be like, that you want your life to mirror in life. And then come back. I said, yes, sir. So I did. And it's something now that I go back to on a yearly basis. The very first time I walked into Life Point and opened my Bible before a couple folks was with the Life Point youth. And the very first thing I said to them was that Jesus is different than every other person on earth if for this one thing. He began with the end in mind. He began with the end in mind. Jesus didn't take anything for granted. He knew what He was doing. Like I had mentioned this past Monday when Jesus walked into the temple, you see after this triumphal entry, a level of gravity to every step, a level of gravity to every breath, every word mattered. But for Jesus, that wasn't new. For us, these moments make us, if you will, tether ourselves to truth in a little bit more permanent way, where we can be a little bit whimsical, not taking every thought captive, not thinking about the implications of our actions in the way that we should. And Jesus, in His final hour, shared with us His grave concerns. And we found out something very, very important about Jesus. So what are those things? Well, like I said, there's 7 of them, and I've kind of grouped them into 4 different categories. It starts off, as you'll see, with Luke chapter 22 or 23, verse 34, and Luke 23, verse 43, where we start to find the heart of Jesus. First of all, He wanted to restore relationships between God and man, and us and one another. Okay? And so we see this first with Jesus as He is on the cross, looking down at the folks who have hung Him there. And He says, Father, forgive them. They have no idea what they're doing. Forgive them. Restore these relationships with us in them. And then He looks over to His right, and there's a man who's hanging there with Him. On His left, He hears words of mockery. But the one who's hanging next to Him says, Jesus, you are who you are. Can I be with you? Is there really hope beyond this life? Jesus said, oh yes. And today you will be with me in paradise. restoration between God and man. What was broken at the fall. And then he looks down to his feet and he sees John, his beloved disciple. John self-proclaimed himself the beloved disciple. He's a goofball, but he's standing there next to his mother. And he looks down and he says, John, mother, behold your son, behold your mother. And as he hangs there himself, bleeding and broken, he doesn't even think of himself. He looks at his mother and says, I'm not going to let you be alone. And John, you take care of her. Jesus, that's his heart. Our hearts are all over the place. Right now, our emotions are just everywhere. And Jesus is saying, hey, first things first. Relationships. Know that sin and the brokenness of man, because of it, is ultimately manifested in broken relationships. It is Satan's greatest tool to distract and destroy us. We need to check those. But not only Jesus' heart, what we also find is Jesus' humanity. He was real. Philippians 2, it shows he was real. He was God in flesh, and he felt the pain. He had the anxiety and the struggles. And we find that Jesus, while he is on the cross, in two different ways, he expresses humanity. First of all, he's referencing to Psalm 22, my God, why have you forsaken me? This is a cry of anguish. Some would say he's just referencing back to another fulfillment of prophecy in Psalm 22. I think it's surely that. But he's also looking up and he's saying, I am in pain. Not just physically, but the weight of sin, the weight of the world has been placed on my shoulders and I bear it. And as a result, I am feeling in the depth of who I am, a separation between me and you. And as he hangs there between humanity below him and God above him, knowing that he is the intercessor in the only way to the Father, he's saying, this is a heavy thing. Sin is not a joke. The payment is very costly. We also see Jesus, though, later on, where he says in John 19:28, he says, I thirst. This is before he gives his final words on the cross. He says, I thirst. This also references a psalm in Psalm 69:21, but for Jesus, he says, I am thirsty. I'm a man, and I'm thirsty. Jesus is real. We see in Hebrews 4 that Jesus is our high priest, but not one who's removed from our pain and sufferings, but one who is merciful. Why? Because he's felt it. He's been there. If you and your family right now feel like you are struggling, if you feel like we're alone because we're isolated and people, like no one understands what's really going on outside here or inside here, the chaos and the toil and the struggle, Jesus wants to say, first of all, I love you. And two, he wants to say, I know you. I get that. You're not alone. And more than that, I can heal it. His next saying on the cross, we find this both in John 19:30. He says, it is finished. It's finished. Why is this so powerful? not getting into the weeds of it. But around that particular verb, it is finished, you're seeing normal past tense verbs, and all of a sudden what's dropped in is called a perfect tense verb. And what does it mean? It means what is done here today is now done for eternity. Moving forward, the implications of these actions will play into the future. This doesn't need to be done again. This has been finished. And for you and for me to find hope that Jesus and what he has done and allowing for us to find purity in relationship with him, with others, and within ourselves can actually happen today. God was not a God of the past. I am that I am. He is the present God. And finally, I love this. So in Luke 23:46, this is where Jesus takes his last breath and he says, "Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit." And this is really exciting for me because as I think about the implications of Jesus on the cross, what he's saying is this: remember how it began. When my ministry began, I found John the Baptist and the disciples out there, and I say, baptize me. And so we go in, baptizes, and what happens? The Father, you hear his voice. The Spirit descends like a dove, and you see the picture of the Trinity. As it began, so it ended. Jesus looking up and saying, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. Father, Son, Spirit. We see the beautiful picture of the Trinity. And what I would say here is this: we find that Jesus is a home body. Okay? And for us, that means a lot right now. Jesus is a home body. And we know that home is where the heart is. And the heart of God, the heart of Jesus, is found in this unique, undisturbed relationship within himself through which he creates man, because we were created in his image. And so what do we find out of all of this? What do we find out of all of this? We find that Jesus' heart is for us. We find that Jesus' humanity gets us, right? We find that his healing can reach us. And we find that his home, he wants to be with us. Guys, there's so much wrapped up in Good Friday. You know, we could sit here for so much more time together, but as I reflect on these things, I want us all to take a moment now and do that. For you as an individual, for you as a family, I want to encourage you to walk through the same exercise that Mr. Fifield walked me through, which is, if you never got to tell anybody what to write on that tombstone, what would you want it to say? Wrestle with those questions. Be as Jesus and begin with the end in mind. Because that is exactly what it means to be a disciple. In Luke 9, starting in verse 23, Jesus says to everyone, all who want to come after me must say no to themselves, deny themselves, take up their cross daily, and follow me. All who want to save their lives will lose them, but all who lose their lives because of me will save them. What advantage do people have if they gain the whole world for themselves, yet lose their soul? Deny ourselves, pick up our cross, and follow him daily. That's our call. That's our call. I hope this video finds you, your family, blessed. But more than that, I hope it finds you in a place of reflection. Let's not waste this time that God has given us. Let's put on again, Jesus' sandals, and let's walk with him. Let's see what that means on a daily basis. I love you all. Blessings on you, Good Friday.